is. But first of all, if I can, this is the program we have, the agenda we are going to have. We have this welcome that is very short. Then we are going to have a message from the Dean of the School of Engineering and Sciences of the Tecnológico de Monterrey. This is our institution. Although I have to say that today we have people from Colombia, from the Uniminuto University, as well as many people from Chile and Panama that are here with us. And we have some, actually, I have to say, we have some companies that are actually with us, like Bristol, Myers Squibb, and also Evonik, that those are German companies that are also with us today. Then we are going to have a guest presentation, and the seminar is going to be next. Okay, we are going to have a question and answer sessions that you can, I have to say, you can write your question in the chat, and we're going to be happy to pass on the question, or if you want to ask directly to Rovani, she's going to be happy to answer your questions. And after that, we are going to have a final message from the leader of MIC, Gabriela Ortiz, that is also with us. That we're also very happy to have her here because she's the boss. Okay, thank you very much. Then we are going to give the time for the message from the Dean of the School of Engineering and Sciences, Dr. Manuel Certuche. Please go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing. Is that okay? Oh, okay. Thank you, Marika.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Manuel Certuche. I am the Dean of the School of Engineering and Sciences here at Tec de Monterrey. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today in this seminar, which titles How Accessible is STEM for Girls and Young Women. We are very grateful to Dr. Rovani Sigamoney for giving us the opportunity to learn from her experience and as a leader, a woman in charge of the UNESCO engineering program, and appreciate her passion to encourage young girls and women to get involved in STEM areas. The Women in Engineering and Sciences Initiative, MIC, or MIC, standing for the words in Spanish, Mujeres en Ingeniería y Ciencias. It's an initiative of the School of Engineering Sciences and Tec de Monterrey. And it's a group of women who are always on guard to ensure equal opportunities for women scientists and engineers in our institutions, and in accordance to UN Sustainable Development Goals 4 and 5, quality education and gender equality. Furthermore, MIC has become a vital leverage and advocate of science, engineering, and technology to attract young girls to STEM professional careers by showing them the unique and innovative pathway that the STEM disciplines offer to women around the world. This seminar today offers us the opportunity to get a fuller sense and understanding about the global standing and the implications of being a woman passionate about science. According to UNESCO data, we know that today less than 30% of the world scientists are women. This is compared to other fields, such as humanities, where the numbers of female participation reach up to 70%. The reasons for this gender gap in STEM areas are multiple and of different nature. However, it is up to us, as the ones responsible for the education of the next generations of professionals, to provide the necessary knowledge and tools to bridge out this gap and to understand the true impact of female participation in research, engineering, development, technology, and education. As Dr. Sigamoney and the thousands of women scientists and engineers from Tecnológico de Monterrey and from around the world have certainly shown us. We hope you enjoy this seminar, which the School of Engineering and Sciences, through its initiative MIC, has organized for all of you. Dr. Rovani Sigamoney Welcome to Tec de Monterrey, and thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much to the dean. And let me go here. Okay, thank you, Dr. Manuel Certuche, for your message, and I think it's very much appreciated by Rovani. And now we are going to have the presentation of our distinguished speaker, and then I'm going to ask Professor and Dr. Vianney Lara, who is in charge of the link initiative of the MIC. Please go ahead with the presentation, Dr. Vianney.
Thank you, Jorge. Hi, everyone. So, Dr. Rovani Sigamoney is a chemical environmental engineer from South Africa who started in the platinum refinery mining sector and then moved on to the research in bioengineering, energy systems, and biofuels for Africa. She joined the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, in Paris, France in 2007 in the natural sciences sector and later ran the chemistry program and International Year of Chemistry 2011. She thereafter took over the UNESCO engineering program. The engineering program is working with 195 international partners and program experts to strengthen engineering education through curricula development, hands-on training, and capacity building. In line with UNESCO's global priorities on Africa and gender equality, it focuses on women and Africa, but also has activities around the world. Rovani is passionate about women in engineering and encouraging more youth to pursue careers in engineering. This is today's topic. Welcome, Rovani. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much, Vianney, for the nice presentation. And now the floor is yours, Robani. Thank you very much again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Vianney. Also, I would like to say thank you to the Dean for his message and to Professor Gabriela and to everyone that was involved in the presentation to invite me here, especially Professor Jorge. So I am really excited. I have to say this is one of my passions, to talk to young people, especially about getting young women and young girls into STEM subjects and into engineering. I will firstly give you a background about UNESCO. I will then tell you about some statistics and data about women in science and engineering. And then I will tell you about some programs that UNESCO for engineering. And finally, I would conclude about how to go forward. So the next slide, please. So talking about UNESCO, the constitution of UNESCO says that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. Thus, UNESCO contributes to peace and security by promoting collaboration amongst nations through education, science, culture, and communication. The next slide. UNESCO was created in 1945. And what is really interesting is that the mandate of UNESCO was signed at the Institute of Civil Engineers in the UK. So engineering has always been at the heart of the work of UNESCO. UNESCO has five sectors concentrating on education so that every child, boy or girl, has access to quality education. Also in terms of building intercultural understanding, so the culture of people. And this is where UNESCO is most well known for the World Heritage Protection Sites, which is one of our biggest projects. Then we have the science sector, where we have scientific cooperation, where we look at early warning systems, tsunamis, man and the biosphere, and science and engineering, education and curricular development. And then we have the freedom of expression sector as well, where we look at what UNESCO is doing for journalists and freedom of expression around the world. The next slide, please. So, in terms of the science sector, UNESCO aims to create holistic policies that are capable of addressing the social, environmental, and economic dimensions of sustainable development. UNESCO has 195 member states and 8 associate members. And around the world, we have 50 offices, one being in Mexico as well. And our headquarters is in Paris, France. The next slide. So, looking at women in STEM, what is quite interesting is that women and girls continue to be excluded from participating fully in science. According to a UN study conducted in 14 countries, the probability for female students to graduate with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a doctor's degree is around 18, 8, and 2% respectively. This is compared to the percentage of male students, where males graduate with a bachelor's degree, which is around 37%. For masters, it's around 18%. And around with the doctor's degree, this is 6%. So there's a huge, vast difference between the graduation of women and men just in the science fields. The next slide, please. When we look at UNESCO and girls in STEM education, we find that, as I said, UNESCO is quite diverse in terms of culture, education, communication, and information. UNESCO has 2 global priorities, one being Africa and the other being gender equality. Thus, we work a lot on women in STEM and particularly in my case, on women in engineering. When we look at the challenges are that there's a decrease in interest among youth in studying science, technology, engineering, and maths. And this is not just a gender problem, because we find also young men are turning more to finances instead of science. STEM is also stereotyped as a male-dominated field, especially the hard sciences like maths, physics, and engineering. Thus, we need to change the mindsets of people, communities, and also get more gender stereotypes out and get more role models in for girls and women. We need strong women role models in science, technology, engineering, and maths that encourage young women to take up scientific careers and also lift women up. What we also find is that women in scientific careers also want to have families and have children. So women in scientific careers also raise families. So they need to be helped in terms of social structures and support systems while doing their research. And this is usually a large challenge in many countries. Next slide, please. So we find that when we look at women in research, we have the leaky pipe syndrome. And this particular visual is from the UNESCO Science Report of 2015, where we find that around 53% of young women graduate with a bachelor's and a master's degree. But when we look at PhDs, there's only around 43% of women. And then when we go on to researchers, there's only around 28% of researchers around the world. And this is really low. The next slide. Looking specifically at women researchers, we know that there's great disparities around the world from one region to another. When we look at Southeast Europe, we find that women researchers have obtained parity. So there's around 50% of women and men. And if we look at Central Asia, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, they are doing very well with around 44% of women in research. And then when we look at the European Union, it's really low, with only 1 in 3 women researchers being a woman. In sub-Saharan Africa, we also find only around 30% of women. And it's even lower in Southeast Asia with only 17%. But what we find is that when we look at the women in research in the science fields, we find that most of the women graduates are in the life sciences, where there are more than 50% of women. And we find that in North America and Europe, there are very few women who study physics, mathematics, and computer sciences, but also in many other regions of the world. The next slide, please. So when we look at women in engineering, the figures are far worse than women in research. We find that in Europe and North America, the percentage is really low, around 19%. And then there are some countries which have quite high, and these are the exceptions, like 38% of women studying engineering in Denmark and 50% of women in Cyprus. But there are regional exceptions where the share of women graduating in sub-Saharan Africa has risen, as well as the Arab states and Asia. And then we find in the Arab countries as well, we have around 30% of women studying engineering. But we find in countries like Oman, we have an astonishing 53% of women studying engineering. Next slide, please. When we look closely at Latin America and the Caribbean, what is really great and quite surprising is that Latin America has some of the world's highest rates of women studying scientific careers. And it shares it with the Caribbean, where, as I said, there's around 44% of women studying science. But I have to say that once again, these studies are disproportionate because many of these young women are studying health sciences or medicine as well. And so these numbers are grouped in with these women. We have 12 countries reporting data where 7 have achieved gender parity in countries like Bolivia, Venezuela, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, and even Guatemala. And Costa Rica is very close behind as well. In engineering, women make up only around 30% of the graduates in countries like Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic. What is quite noteworthy is that we find that there is a decrease of women in engineering in Latin America, especially in countries like Argentina, Chile, and Honduras. However, what is quite good is that in Mexico, we actually find that there is an increase of women in engineering, and this is good news. Next slide, please. When we look at computer science, we find that there's a steady decrease since 2000 in the number of young women taking up and studying computer science. There are exceptions where there's been increases in Denmark from 15 to 24%. But when we look at a country like Germany, we find an increase from 10 to 17%, which is extremely low and not even close to 30%. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we find that the situation is quite worrying with the low percentage of women graduates and the fact that many countries, the number of women graduating in computer science has fallen by between 2 and 13%. And then we have countries where there are exceptions like Turkey, where the number of women studying engineering has increased to around 33%. In India, the image of engineering has changed, and thus we find that there are more women that are studying engineering. So what is UNESCO doing to encourage more women to take up careers in science, technology, engineering, and maths? Well, next slide, please. One of the biggest projects that we have is the UNESCO L'Oreal Women in Science Partnership. This started in 1998, and so far we have more than 112 laureates from 30 countries around the world. And these are usually exceptional women who have made great advances in their scientific research. We find that 5 of these women have gone on to receive the Nobel Prize, and one was also the president of a country. This is quite a big feat, I would say, because when we look at the number of women who receive Nobel laureates, there's only 4% of women that make up the Nobel Prize laureates. So 5 of them being part of the UNESCO L'Oreal partnership is a great achievement for us. We also have the international fellowships, which have been granted to more than 3,400 women in 115 countries around the world. And we have also a manifesto for science that was launched in Paris and had more than 90,000 signatures for gender parity in science. Next slide, please. One of UNESCO's other projects is the 1 Million Girls in STEM campaign. This was launched at the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, in the UN in New York, on the 13th of March 2017. And one of the signature programs that we have is that we have young girls and we have the Think Pink Hard Hat Challenge, where young women decorate the pink hard hat and learn about careers in engineering and in STEM, as well as how they can how they could study engineering when they grow up. And so far, we have a total of 19 countries globally that have been involved in the campaign, and more than 50,000 women have been influenced by it. Next slide, please. Another one of our projects is where we partnered with the International Civil Aviation Organization to look at women in aviation. What we find is that women make up less than 10% of the aviation workforce around the world, and only around 5% of women are pilots. This is extremely low. And when we look at women in aviation that are not pilots, at the national level, they can drop to below 5%. So this is why we worked with ICAO to organize the first Global Aviation Gender Summit for Women, which took place in South Africa in 2018, and which got more than 2,000 participants from around the world coming together to look at aviation around the world. Next slide, please. Another one of UNESCO's projects is the UNESCO Airbus Fly Ideas competition, where since 2008, it has inspired over 22,000 students from over 100 countries to register from 700 universities. And these are usually students who come together to have ideas about sustainable aviation for the future and how to improve it. Proposals have covered greener aviation industry and topics such as electrification, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and mixed reality. What is really great is that some teams went on to patent their ideas, and they actually sold them to the airlines. So this has been a really great partnership, but also great for students to come up with new ideas for the future. Next slide, please. Another one of our projects is the UNESCO Science and Engineering Fairs, where the first one was held in Nigeria together with Engineers Without Borders in the UK. And we trained 120 university students from the university in Nigeria. And we went on to train 2,000 school pupils, where 1,500 of them were girls. And they had 4 experiments that they did, which was all about hands-on learning in STEM. And this was about global water situation, adequate housing, transportation and infrastructure, and hydroelectric power generation. And these were also projects where the students were able to think outside of the box and come up with innovative solutions that they could use around them. Next slide, please. UNESCO has created the Engineering Week Africa, which started in 2014 and has now taken place in many countries in Africa, starting in South Africa, going to Zimbabwe, Zambia, and as well as Rwanda. And this Engineering Week was created to increase the role and encourage students, especially young women, to study engineering with practical engineering applications, and to incite more African countries to participate and ensure the sustainability of their efforts for engineering education. The next slide, please. Another one of UNESCO's projects is where we have partnered with IEEE to do the REACH project, where REACH stands for Raising Engineering Awareness through the Conduit of History project. This was a roadshow pilot activity to deliver lesson plans to pre-university girls in Uganda in several rural locations, which was really good because it's very difficult to take STEM education to rural areas, especially if you need Wi-Fi and electricity. So what we did is we had a moving classroom trailer truck, which was used to go to the underserved communities to provide the program to teachers and the hands-on activities to students. This program also supported the Uganda National Curriculum Development Center's curriculum for the year. So we worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Education. And this was just from October to December last year, where we trained 250 student teachers and 1,000 pupils who participated in the program. And also considering that this was during COVID, it was quite a big task and a good achievement. Next slide, please. So finally, how do we get more young women interested in engineering? What we need to do is we need to empower young women with knowledge and information about engineering and science so that they can make informed decisions and choose the path of study and careers. We need to ensure that there is no gender bias in technology and devices for girls and boys, especially when they are very young. And we should strive to make access to technology accessible to girls and young women. But also, while we have access to technology and people on the internet, we should ensure that they are safe from cyber attacks and young women are protected online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rovani, for all the data and all the initiatives that UNESCO are actually running for women in engineering. Then I will ask America to conduct the questions and answers section. And please go ahead, America, please.
Thank you very much, Rovani, and thank you very much, Dr. Jorge. So for the people who have questions for Dr. Rovani about this seminar, please, if you want to write them in the chat, and then we're gonna select some questions, and we're gonna ask Dr. Rovani to please answer them for us. So if you have any questions, please just type them in the chat, and we're gonna read them. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so remember also that if you're watching this seminar via Facebook Live, you can also type your questions on in the comments and we can read them too for Dr. Rovani. So we have a first question here, and it is, Dr. Rovani, what is the role of the teachers as, for taking girls to STEM careers?
So thank you for that question. And I would say that teachers are actually the most important role models. I think young students grow up with teachers being someone that gives them, their knowledge at school, but also encourages them. And I would say that I took up engineering because when I was 11 years old, my mathematics teacher at school actually told me that because I had good maths marks, I should look at engineering as a course. And he said, specifically chemical engineering. At that age, I have to admit that I didn't know much about engineering or that even women did engineering. But I did keep that at the back of my mind while researching careers. And it just so happened that I did become a chemical engineer in the end. So I think that teachers are role models even before they realize. So it's really important for them to to treat women and young girls and boys the same in their class, but also encourage them to take up careers in science and engineering.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rovani. So now we have a question from Adrian Soto. In your experience, Dr. Rovani, to what extent the internet content on mathematics and engineering can narrow the gender gap in STEM?
Thanks, Adrian, for that question. So I would say that it's good to have work on the internet and to look at programs on the internet, but looking at you have to have it age appropriate for different levels. And when we look at narrowing the gender gap, I would say that we would have to start with very young kids. So young girls, I would say even from primary school, from 5, 6, 7 years old, because this is the age as well where the divide in stereotype begins, and the male and the female kind of careers and thinking and toys. So I would say that online courses and internet content on maths and engineering is really important online, but it has to be age appropriate. And at university level, especially during this time of the global pandemic, I think that it has been one of the saviors actually for young people to actually communicate with each other, but also learn more and take up more courses.
Thank you very much for your answer. Now we have another question from Alondra. How can we encourage young girls to get closer to science?
Thank you, Alondra. So I would say be a role model. I would say that everyone that's studying science, that loves science and maths, you need to take that love to the young people, talk to them. One of the experiences is that when I was doing a gap year, I traveled to the USA and then to Brazil. So I worked as an English teacher in Brazil. And I loved the experience. I also started studying Portuguese. But one of the best parts for me was that lots of my friends were teachers. So we went to, I would say, to schools that were not very fortunate. They were not, in the big areas. But I would talk to them, of course, through an interpreter. But for them as well, it was, they wanted to know more about where I was, about Africa, where I came from. But also, I spoke to them about science, about what I was studying. And I think that it made a difference, because sometimes just seeing someone else or another woman in that field gives little people or young people encouragement. So I think role models are extremely important.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question from Dr. Rocio Diaz de la Garza. So, Dr. Vani, when you were a student and chose engineering, what was the most difficult challenge and how did you overcome it?
So thank you for that question, Doctor. So I would say that my biggest challenge was relating what I was studying with the real world and what was out there. I felt that at the time, engineering through the books was very intensive. And I would say engineering is kind of the course where you have to study a lot. So while I was at university, many of my friends were going out while I had to study and get to know more. But at the same time, I couldn't connect it to what was really happening in the world. And I think this is where I did vacation work. So during my holidays, which we have the longest vacation in December, I started working on the platinum refinery, which was in another city as well. But this opened my mind up to what I was really studying. It actually gave me more encouragement to really like what I was studying at university, because I could then implement and attach it to what really happens in engineering in everyday life. And so it gave me encouragement. It actually helped me, but also it encouraged me to work harder at university.
Thank you. Now we have a question from Manuel Enriquez. Do you think that the lack of social sciences classes such as history or ethics have something to do with this big gender gap in STEM?
Thank you. Thanks for that. That's a very interesting question. I would say that social sciences and history is important, ethics as well. I think that there's ethics in engineering, which is taught. But I would say that the social divide in engineering is more because of the stereotype of what we think engineering to be, and the fact that throughout the ages, from the time that engineering started, it has been a very male dominated profession. So because of this, the idea through society has never been where we've taught young people and young women that engineering actually helps societies. It has usually been where an engineer, and this was in the first UNESCO engineering report, where young people, I think they were around 7 years old, and they were asked, what do you think is an engineer? And when they were very young, they actually thought that an engineer was a mechanic. But when they grew older, they said that engineer was an older person, an older man with a white hard hat that worked out in, in the field and somewhere far away. So it was also this distant kind of attitude of what the profession is. And I think this is where we need to start to change the way that engineers are looked at. Also to change, because if we look at television and the media, we have a lot of programs on doctors, on lawyers, on on these upcoming forensic science as well, which is great. But we do not have anything teaching young people how exciting engineering is, how engineers have changed the world and what they have done. And I think this kind of change would also help.
Thank you very much for your answer. Now we have a question from Patricia Orozco. What should we do to guarantee that girls stay in the STEM careers path?
Thank you, Patricia. A very, very good question. Because what we find is that most times when even young girls are motivated and start studying, we know that in the science and especially the engineering fields, only 1 in 3 students graduate. So from the class, it could be specifically maybe around 30 to 40% of the students graduate. So it's true that we need to keep them in. I think that one of the ways that we could do this is by, if we look at problem-based learning, is taking problems that are in society, looking at the sustainable development goals and, about poverty and food, the lack of food and access to food around the world, sanitation, these problems, real life problems in our engineering curricula actually will help, I think, keep young women in, or also young men, because they would feel the connection to society and how they make a difference to the world.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we have a question from Professor Luz Videa. And I believe this is a question that we all are dying to know the answer. So, Dr. Rani, who is your main role model and why?
Oh, so I would say I've had many role models growing up, but I would say the starting was definitely my parents. They were my role models who always supported me, but my teachers as well. My teachers have always been encouraging, always, showing me that there are different ways and different things out there, to not always think outside of the box, that there you can have solutions that are not always as set out. And I think that was the biggest encouragement. And later in my life, I found role models, at my workplace. I think that as you grow, your role models evolve as well, depending, on which stage of your life you are. And at the moment, my role models are actually my friends and family that have, are coping with working as well as 2 or 3 babies, because this is not easy to cope, with work, your work life and your professional life, and your personal life together, and and with kids as well. So I think I've had different role models along the way, and most people in my life have been amazing in helping me and supporting me get to where I am.
Thank you very much. And actually, I believe that the answer that you just shared with us, it goes together with the next questions from Aura Tames. So she's asking, what is the importance of the support between women in the STEM areas?
So I think, yes, it's very true that this is one of the most important things. We also need to realize that find that once women enter STEM careers, and sometimes if they go very high up in the ladder, we forget that all it's not easy for all women to get in, also to get to higher ranks. So I would say that women need to move in, but to also pull all the women up, because it's a way of helping each other and determining, because there are so many factors that have kept women back in the workplace. We have the glass ceiling, and the glass ceiling is something that we talk about all the time, where women get to a specific level, but you cannot get higher. And, there's many, many reasons for that. So I would say that women need to help each other to go together, to build up the number of women in STEM, but to also ensure that we encourage the future young people coming in. So I think that is extremely important, that women in STEM stick together and work together to achieve the best for all women and for all mankind as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rovani. Now we have a question from Gabriela Leon. So she's asking, how can we support women that want to study some engineering career, but are facing social stereotypes from inside their families? How can we help them?
Yes, so that would be quite difficult. But I would say that sometimes it would take, education is one of the ways that we could actually help and change the world as well. And so it might be, this is why we started Africa Engineering Week, because we had the lowest numbers of engineers in Africa. And we felt that we needed to change the community. We needed to change the parents' view of what engineering is, so that they would be able to send their daughters to study engineering. Because in many traditional families, there are traditional roles that, and even for studying, girls cannot choose or study whatever they want. So one of the programs that we have done at UNESCO is to talk to parents, to bring in the civil society, even to send out notes, to inform them about what engineering is, what the careers are. So I would say how to help someone that wants to start engineering, but their family do not agree. One of the options is maybe that they approach the university and have a role model, maybe a university lecturer who is a woman, to talk to the parents, to tell them, that women can succeed in this field. It's not only for men. And maybe that would change the mindset of parents as well.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to have just two more questions. The first one is from Dr. Jorge Membrillo. How UNESCO can help to close the gap between the male and female engineer salaries? Is there a UNESCO recognition program to those companies that stop having difference in salaries depending on the gender?
Yes, so this is a great question, Jorge, and also quite a hard one, because it does depend on countries and their laws, and it's a very unfair system, of course. So UNESCO tries to work on the education side, and with companies, we work with them in terms of internships, but specifically in terms of salaries, we do talk about gender equality and gender parity. And we hope that through this, working with governments as well, this will encourage companies to follow suit and do the right thing in ensuring that both men and women are paid the same for the same job. So, UNESCO works with governments, we work with agencies, and we work with the private sector and companies to try and ensure that they would change their policies to ensure that there's gender equality in terms of their policies.
Thank you, Dr. Rani. And last question. This is a general question, but it's related to a question shared by David Silva from Colombia. So, so you were talking about in your seminar about different initiatives from UNESCO to encourage women and girls into STEM areas. So David Silva is asking if there's some projects like this specifically for Colombian girls, and the general question would be, where can we actually access to this information or look for information regarding programs for girls in around the world in different countries?
So I would say that you can always contact me and I can give you information. We also have specific sectors at UNESCO, departments that concentrate on, on projects for Latin America and the Caribbean. And with in terms of STEM careers, we have our science office, which is based in Montevideo. And they have specific projects, but I can always give you that information. We also have usually for postgraduate students from Latin America, including Colombia, we have scholarships that are available for them to, in science and engineering, to study further, to do, I would say even the UNESCO L'Oreal project is for Colombian students as well, to go to study in other countries and bring the knowledge back to their own country. So yeah, there's a lot of information on the UNESCO website, but I can also furnish you with that through Jorge or through anyone if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rovani, for all the information you shared with us. And with this, we officially finished the Q&A session. Dr. Jorge Membrillo.
Yes, thank you very much, Rovani. Very inspiring answers. I think everyone is very happy. Then to finish this seminar and giving thanks to everyone that is attending to this, I'm going to ask our director of MIC, Dr. Gabriela Ortiz, please give us a final message for Rovani.
Thank you, Rovani. We really appreciate. Thank you for sharing this space with us and encouraging girls and women to follow the exciting path to engineering and science. On the part of our initiative, MIC Women in Engineering and Sciences, I thank you, all of you, for giving us space in your life and sharing this moment with us. It is clear to us that there is a lot of work to be done, but to the extent that we communicate and learn to work together, we will be able to close the gender gap and strengthen the participation of women in all areas. On behalf of Tecnológico de Monterrey, I thank you for your presence today. And I want to tell you something that I always mention to my young students. Never forget that we do engineering for a better world. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gabriela. And thank you very much, everyone, for following us. And please be alert and please be, all the initiatives that MIC and all the seminars are published in our sites in Facebook and Twitter, and also in the sites of the tech. Thank you very much, everyone. They are here in the screen. You can have it. And please follow them, and we are going to be in touch with you soon. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Rovani, please stay there.
And we are offline from Facebook.
Okay.
Gabby, do you need me to stop recording?
Yeah, we can stop recording the session right now.
Yes, okay.
It's okay.